Where was it again in Syria that you were?
Can't say specifically, just because they're still.
Oh, that was the one you can't. Right.
There are still Americans there. I don't mind talking to where I was at in Afghanistan, but Syria, there are still Americans on the ground at that particular installation.
And that's really impressive. You were doing this there. So again, I'll put that link down in there. But how did you left Bagram in Afghanistan a couple months before the pullout, and then were you going to Syria, or had you already been there?
So when I was in Afghanistan, I spent a majority of my time in northern Afghanistan, specifically in a province called Mazar-e-Sharif. It's a very northern province in Afghanistan. And that FOB was the big hop-off point where I would touch all the COPs or the combat outposts and the fire bases where all our remote satellites or our remote centers were found. After that, I was slotted on this particular program to go to Syria, my next deployment, doing the same thing that I was doing in Afghanistan, just in a different theater, because this particular company was selling this product to everybody. Along the way, the fall of Afghanistan happened.
Okay. All right. Now I got it straight.
Yep.
All right. You've been in a lot of places in a truncated time, too.
Yes.
It's not like it was like 20 years. Like there was a lot going on. So for people out there who constantly hear about Syria and don't know it nearly as much as, say, Afghanistan or Iraq, I had Joby Warrick in here 2 or 3 months ago, who's Pulitzer winner, amazing writer.
The most fascinating terrorist figure I think I've ever come across. We're familiar with Bin Laden. Bin Laden and Zawahiri, then his number 2 guy, they were of a completely different type. These were people who were professionals. Bin Laden was an engineer. His number 2 was a medical physician, so they're educated, sophisticated people. They have sort of a strategic vision of this terrorist organization they're trying to create. Zarqawi was none of that. He was just a street tough.
We talked all about his book that won the Pulitzer, Black Flags, which was all about ISIS. So some Syria came up, and he started talking about some of the different sects that were forming in there in, say, around the time of ISIS.
Okay.
But his latest book we did not get to in that podcast, and we're going to do a podcast on it in the future, is all about Syria itself during the time period of the 2010s. It's incredible. I'll put that link somewhere as well, maybe in the description for people to check out. But for those at home who just hear about this guy Assad, maybe they've heard some shit on chemical weapons or whatever, and like, yeah, there was some ISIS stuff that was going on there at some point. Like, what is the critical importance of Syria in the United States' eyes, like the reason why we care about it at all and what's going on, and what is the lay of the land presently? So
when I was there, this was during the Trump administration, and this is when you saw Trump's isolationist perspectives that he had kind of trickle its way down into the foreign policy or the actual actions that we took on the ground. I was a observer as all this was happening. Again, I was not serving. I was just working with our customer, who is in this case an ODA team or a Green Beret team, meaning a special forces group that was assigned to this particular region.
So your customer is the United States government.
Right. Yeah. So they would work, for those that are not familiar with what special forces guys do, they work directly with partner force or local elements that are found in whatever region that we are operating in to work by, through, and with partner force to accomplish the goals of the United States.
When they're there, quick question as a clarification, like the special forces guys, that's technically boots on the ground, but are they, in this case, more plainclothes and working that way?
When we were there, there were no military uniforms worn. We were all in civilian attire. You could tell that a bunch of beefed up white dudes at this particular compound are probably Americans and probably not Syrian. But the ops temple or the posturing of those elements are not as over the top, not as pronounced as a normal conventional force would be. An example of this is anytime that we would run convoys, we were always in Range Rovers, and we were always in Toyota trucks, and we were always in Land Cruisers. We were never almost always in the MRABs or the big military looking vehicles that you could drive around and have a lot more protection involved in them. But it's very easy to spot, hey, those are Americans in full kit with their M4s. The whole point of an ODA team is, hey, this is more of a force that is used to use the partner force as a mechanism to accomplish the goals that the United States have. So instead of some 19-year-old from Arkansas dying in the desert, we can utilize and train and equip the local forces that are apparent in these regions to accomplish our goals. And the term that these guys would use a lot is we're going to do what's called combat advising. So this team would get dropped into this particular part of Syria, link up with the local forces and say, hey, at this time we are and still are going after ISIS personnel in this region. Hey, you guys have a common enemy with the United States. We're going to train you and equip you to kill these ISIS people because they're your enemy and they're our enemy.
And this, you're talking about when you were there. So this is 2021, 2022.
This is still happening.
And what's the current, because I'm going to get some of these names wrong,
sure.
But they had like it was the Al-Nusra Front, right? That was the ISIS cell like in Syria or something. And then you had the regular, I forget what they were called, but like the regular rebels, maybe they were backed by Al-Qaeda or something against Assad. And then you had the Assad regime and maybe there was one other in there. Today, you know, is it just like whatever's left of Al-Nusra Front?
My finger is no longer on the pulse of this just because I've been gone for so long now, for a little over a year.
So when you were there?
When I was there, the ops tempo of Afghanistan was surprisingly to me higher speed than it was in Syria for whatever reason. I heard all these war stories about how Syria is just very kinetic right now and, you know, we're running missions every night. When I got there, it was a lot more quiet. Just so happened to be in the cards when I was there. But I can't speak to directly what political groups were in power in the region at the time, quite honestly, because I wasn't briefed on those programs. It wasn't a priority of mine. All I was worried about is, hey, this asset that we got overhead, can I make sure that we can see what the pilot is seeing? The people that I'm talking about, though, the ODA teams that are directly there, they can speak to exactly, hey, these political groups and these regional leaders that are apparent in this area, we work directly with them to train up local elements that are found in these forces to disband ISIS groups that are found operating within these regions. And what I did see when I was there, though, is we kind of lump ISIS and the Taliban and Al-Qaeda all into this big pool together. In many cases, the Taliban and Al-Qaeda would try to hunt down and kill ISIS forces because even between them, they're a little crazy. They disagreed. We would call that just enemy combatants killing other enemy combatants because even though they're all enemies of the United States, we found that their political disparities between even them were so far-reaching that we were just trying to fund and equip and train almost anybody in that region that was an enemy of those forces.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. Please hit that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.